For this lesson, open up your exercise folder and select an image that begins with 687. It's another photo spin image. Let's talk about when we convert an image to black and white, our motivation for doing that. Now, I grew up with black and white in a darkroom that my dad built for me when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and he gave me a camera. Color was just too expensive for me to process, so I farmed that out to the companies like Kodak and that did that. But I did my own black and white work. Today, black and white is considered retro, but black and white can also be used to make an image look older than it really is. So our goal is to age this image, make it look a little bit older with some pretty simple techniques. Now, years ago when I used to do this in Photoshop, before the adjustment layers and everything came out, I might have up to, a dozen layers doing all kinds of different things. We have more control than we ever had before with adjustment layers. So we're going to start with the black and white adjustment layer. Let's come down here, click the little half moon icon, and go up to black and white. We were here in the very last lesson. Now, I'm going to click this button here to control things. I did make a change. I did change my sample size to a 3:3 average. It will always remember the last thing you did. So I'm going to come over into the sky, sample, click, and I'm going to darken that up just a little bit. Come over here maybe into this area. Come over here too. Now, one of the things is when you are creating a aged image, if you will, one of the things, if it's old, it won't have as much detail as a digital image taken today. So when you're doing these changes, for example, in black and white, one of your goals is probably to lose some of the detail that's in the image because it's supposed to look old. So I like where we're going so far. I can come back later and change that if I want to. I think I want to tint this one too. Tinting was not a process done purposely on old images. It's typically oxidized chemicals in the paper that were never washed out, and over the centuries, or over the years, basically it began to oxidize and go brown or other colors. So if we go tint right here, we can tint the image. Now, if you want to change the color, click here, and I can go into my color libraries, and it will take you into the Pantones. Drop that down to a little bit of a warmer color, something like that. Go ahead and click OK. Okay, now I'm happy. So we're going to leave that alone. Let's collapse this out for a second. So we've got it tinted. We've lost the color. Next step, create a new layer. Right here. Just click the new layer icon and create a new layer. Call this one Noise. I usually name my layers. I work on images sometimes that can have up to 100 or more layers. And layer 37 means very little to me. So I usually do stop and name layers. Come over into your swatches and pick a neutral gray color. It doesn't have to be exactly 50%, just choose a gray. Now, what you want to do is fill this noise layer with that color. So we're going to use a shortcut to make it easier. The shortcut is the same keys, but different on a Mac and a Windows. If you're on a Windows system, hold the Alt key and press the backspace key. If you're on a Mac, hold the Option key and press the Delete key. The same keys, I wish they'd get the names together. Go up to the word Filter on the pull-down menu and go down to Noise and Add Noise. Now, I want on this one, about 100, I think. So I'm going to change that to about 100. I want Gaussian, which is more of a random noise than uniform. And I don't want any color. So I'm going to turn on monochromatic. Now, understand the number 100 is based very much on the resolution of the image. If you're working on HD images or very low resolution images, you might change that number. Let's click OK. Now we need to introduce, blend if you will, that noise. Very easy to do. Go up to the blending mode option here. The two you would use here are either multiply or screen. Now if you do screen, actually it takes away all the dark and leaves the lighter areas. So if your idea is to make snow, this might not be a bad place to start. We want multiply. Go into multiply. Now that removes the lighter areas and leaves the darker areas, which to me is the grain of the old photograph. So with that done, let's go ahead and let's lower the opacity just a little bit here. About like that. Now we're not done. Let's go into noise and go down to our adjustments and pick up levels. Now I only want the levels adjustment to control noise. So with it selected here, I'm going to click this button right over here. And you can see what it does. It locks it just into the noise layer. I'm going to come over here then and move this. And you can see it will lighten it up, but it's still going to leave those dark areas. Kind of what I want. I want that grain look to the image. Now the cool thing about doing everything we have done up to this point is the obvious thing is everything is non-destructive. You can come back tomorrow and say, man, I really don't like this, and start all over again. Now I want to introduce a little bit more imperfection to the image itself. So make a copy, go to background and make a copy of background. Let's use the shortcut. And that is Control in Windows, Command on a Mac, and the letter J as in John. Background copy selected. Go up to the word Filter, go down to Blur, and select Motion Blur. You could try different ones here. That's a little bit too much. I just want a little bit of motion blur in here, something about like that. I'm going to click OK. Now change the blending mode of this one. Now you could do it up front so you could watch the process. Change that to soft light. You can see what that did. Just very slightly began creating more of an imperfection to the image. It's an old photograph. It was taken with an old camera. Now one more thing we could do here besides going back and playing around with our features is let's go to the top. Let's create another new layer. Old images many times, because of the deterioration of the paper itself, get darker along the edges. So with the new layer selected, pick up your rectangular marquee tool. You're right about, in the corner right here. Draw yourself a border, something like that. Inverse it. Select inverse. Fill that area with pure black. Now, if you press the letter D as in David on your keyboard, that will default your colors to black and white, and let's go back to our shortcut. Alt, backspace, Windows, Option, Delete, Mac. Just like that. Let's go ahead and go up to the word Filter, and this time do a Gaussian blur to soften that up. It's a little bit more than what I want, I think. How about like that? Go ahead and click OK. And then maybe lower the opacity so it's not quite so pronounced. Just like that. So we started with this image right down here, and we, basically aged it, made it look even older. In my opinion, part of the believability of anything like this being carried out would be the simple fact that the image looks like it's supposed to be old in the first place. I mean, I wouldn't take a picture of, London right now and then try to make it look 100 years old. That wouldn't make sense. But in the case of this, part of the believability of the image is the house itself. So it's not that difficult, totally non-destructive. Everything we've done can be reversed or it can be changed. For example, if I go back to black and white and select it, maybe I want just a hint of color in the image. What I can do is change the opacity of the black and white filter and just bring in just a little bit of color. Just like that. You're in total control of the entire process. Aging an image is not that difficult, as long as you got Photoshop.